Char, how's it going?
It's going very well, Dr. Tran. This is a pleasure to be with you.
Awesome. And then where are you at the moment?
I'm in our game room at our home on the Concept Therapy Institute campus, just outside of San Antonio.
Okay, perfect. And then are you originally from Texas or where did you grow up?
I grew up in El Paso, Texas. That's as far west as you can get in Texas and still be there. And I grew up there through high school years and then decided I wanted to go to college in California.
Okay.
A specific school, Chapman College, it was called then. Now it's called Chapman University. But at that time, they had a program called the World Campus Afloat, which is still operating under a different name and different school sponsorship. But they would take 400 students and 100 faculty and basically go around the world. And students would take a full course of regular college classes while they were on the ship. And then when they got to ports, they had to do certain things in order to get credit for the courses they were enrolled in.
Okay.
And I thought that sounded fascinating. I wanted to go to that college. So I did a semester on land and then a semester at sea. And I loved the going around the world business and waited another semester on land. And then I did another semester at sea.
Oh, wow.
But a whole different itinerary. From first one was east to west, the other one was north to south, pretty much.
And then after you graduated, what did you do after that?
I studied business and ended up going back for my master's in administration.
Okay.
And became a professor.
Oh, wow.
Of economics and business administration. And I taught out in California for 10 years or so. But at the same time, I was teaching concept therapy.
Okay. And then when did you first come across concept therapy?
Now you've asked the question. The $1 million one, you've heard this before probably, but I'll remind you. I heard of it first when I was 2 years old. That was 4 or 5 years ago. My parents and grandparents took some of the first courses offered to lay people. Up until that time, it had been offered to doctors only, primarily chiropractors, but other physicians and professionals as well. And I was 2 years old. I spoke only Spanish. My mother taught me Spanish first so that I would never have to take a foreign language in school. She knew I'd learn English, which, by the way, was the hardest thing I think I've ever done, is learning English. But, I have little flicks of memory of that period, tiny flicks, but they had a class. I'll tell you how. My grandfather's secretary's mother.
Okay.
All right. Her name was Mrs. Ford Bell. Her first name was Lula Bell. And she suffered from epilepsy, the grand mal types of seizures. And her doctor in Little Valentine, Texas, which is about the size of your dining room table, probably. Her doctor there had sent her to different places. And he finally made arrangements for her to go to Mayo's. And she went up there to the Mayo brothers, and they said, look, your doctor's doing everything that we know to do. And you're just going to have to put up with it and adapt to it. We do not have an answer for you. Yet she wanted to get over this thing because it was terrible. And the seizures were increasing in frequency. And so she went back down to her doctor crying, and I couldn't do anything. What am I going to do? He says, I am at my wit's end. I don't know, but there's this fellow called Dr. Thurman Fleet in San Antonio, and I hear he's got a place where they treat people, and maybe he can do something, because I've heard interesting stories about him, but I don't know anything about it. So she made arrangements and took the train to San Antonio And Dr. Fleet, she had an appointment with him and he examined her. And she says, I need a doctor that can help me. And he said, Ms. Bell, he says, you don't need a doctor. You have had plenty of doctors. What you need is understanding.
Mm.
And he says, there's a class going on right now. You get yourself in that class, in that building over there, and you listen very carefully to what the instructors say, and then come to me and we'll adjust you and take care of this once and for all. So she did. She sat in that class, which back then was a 10-day class, and she sat in it and was doing very well. And Dr. Fleet adjusted her after that. And she never had another seizure for the rest of her life. And which was amazing to her. But she felt so much better and she wasn't on edge all the time and so on. And so she called her daughter. That's my grandfather's secretary. And she told him. And he said, that sounds interesting. Have your mom have the people down there send me some information on this. I'm interested in it. And back came in a few days a letter from the Institute saying your information will arrive at such and such a time on such and such a train. And please pick it up. And he thought to himself, why on earth didn't they just mail it? Why are they sending me something I've got to go down and pick up? So at the Tuesday, whatever it was, at 3 p.m., he left his office, got in the car, drove to the train station, got out, went in, looked for a package. There was no package for him. And he felt a tap on his shoulder and turned around. There were two men in suits and hats and very proper for the day. This is early 1950s. And one of them said, are you Paul Harvey? He said, yes, I am. And they said, I'm Dr. Thurman Fleet, and this is Dr. Conrad O'Shank, and we're here to teach a class in concept therapy. And my grandfather said, all I wanted was information. And they said, and you're going to get it too. And so they did a lecture probably that evening, another one on Wednesday, another one on Thursday, and they had a good-sized class by Friday. And the lectures were advertised in the paper and were open to the public and so on. So they had a good-sized class, everything from optometrists to hotel staff. My grandfather and grandmother owned a hotel at that point in San Antonio, in El Paso.
Mhm.
And the class was very good. My grandfather was so impressed with what he heard and what he learned that he insisted they come back in a month or 2 months and do another class. And so they did. And so in that class, my mother and father and great aunt and grandmother and a bunch of others were in that class, along with a lot of other people from that first class that had just been thoroughly impressed, wanted to hear it again, and wanted to bring their spouses, kids, and so on. But it was a big class that they had. And from that, it started. The only thing I remember is that one day a week, and I'll just blame Tuesday. I don't know why I have it on Tuesday, but this is a Tuesday. All right, anyway. So on Tuesday, they disappear at night, leaving me with a babysitter. And I didn't like that too much. And later, much later, I found out they were attending a study group for concept therapy, what they call a beam club, because the motto for the organization is to live on the beam. It's a term from the 40s about staying on the signal in order to get to your goal. And they would study, and that club was active for decades. I did not take a concept therapy class until I was 14.
Mhm.
And I remember there were many things going on in my 14-year-old world that I had learned English, of course, by that point. And I had questions. I wondered why one of my best friends in El Paso, why his parents went through divorce, And his sister was so upset, she tried to commit suicide
Mm.
over this. And my mother and dad had divorced years earlier, and she didn't go through that kind of stuff. And I said, what was the difference? Why didn't you have these kind of reactions like this one did? And she said, well, it has to do with concept therapy. And that was the answer I was getting to a lot of my questions about why and what and so on. And the answer always came back, in concept therapy, you'll learn that. And I said, concept therapy, this, I remember this vividly in the kitchen. I said, concept therapy, this, concept therapy, that. When can I take concept therapy? She said, we've been waiting for you to ask. So I asked, and sure enough, that summer we came down here. We flew from El Paso to San Antonio and then drove out to this dusty, it was then, ranch. They were just coming out of a drought and it was a mess, but came here for a concept therapy class. And it had shortened by then. It was like 5 days or so. And then the weekend was spent on what Dr. Fleet called wingdings. It was an excuse for a party. And so it was all kinds of partying going on the weekend and touring around and stuff. And then it was followed up immediately the next week by a class in conceptology, phase 1. There's 7 phases to conceptology. And so that combo of concept therapy and conceptology, I thought I had the world by the tail and understood everything at that point. It took a while to figure out I didn't.
Mhm.
There were aspects that still required study and experience. But I studied concept therapy and I was turned on to all kinds of other studies as well, and studied things from the Far East and from India, and things from Europe and so on. And finally, I decided I wanted to be an instructor. That was, 6 years later. And by then I'd had all the courses that were available at that time. And so I took my teacher's training in 1970, and here I am, still teaching.
And then how old were you at 1970?
1970, I was 19.
Wow. So what was the turning point for you, and what inspired you to become a teacher at such a young age?
I saw finally in those years between my first class and then, I saw that Dr. Fleet was really trying to get this idea across.
Mhm.
And I saw that he needed help. He needed teachers that would teach this and not something else. And I'd had experiences from both kinds of teachers, those that went off and were teaching all kinds of things, and those that kind of stuck to the principles and really presented Dr. Fleet's vision for this. And I decided I wanted to help and be one of those that presented his vision.
Mhm.
He'd been through hell and back again in his life story, and I just decided I wanted to help. So I informed my parents and grandparents that I wanted to take a teacher's training class. It was going to be one taught in Anaheim, California, where I was nearby, where I was a student and a teacher at that point. And it was going to be taught by Reverend E.L. Crump and Catherine Calhoun at that time. And they said, they're really good teachers. And if you really want to do this, all right, we'll help you with the tuition. So they did, and I did, and that was it. Started to teach right away.
That's awesome. And then for chiropractors unfamiliar with concept therapy and Dr. Fleet, how would you describe its core philosophy in a way that it would resonate with their work?
I would describe the core philosophy, and it would apply equally to lay people and chiropractors, as based on an understanding of natural law and its application by an individual in their life. And it pertains to all aspects of living, physical, mental, spiritual. It's universal in that sense. And it's up to each individual to use their own reasoning abilities to have this information presented to them and then decide, does it make sense or not? And do I want to use it or not? And so for lots of people, it makes sense and they use it and they get results. Whether it's, I categorize the areas that people are most interested in 4 categories. Health is one that everybody wants. It's basic. And if you don't have that, you basically don't have any of the others anyway, because all your attention is going to go to the one you're lacking. So health obviously is going to be a driving force for some. For others, they're fairly healthy, but they want happiness. And in looking in life, they've had some happiness, but they've had a lot of unhappiness along the way too. And they'd like to attain and hang on to that happiness. For another, they may have that, but they don't feel successful. Either success as an individual, as a mate, or as a parent, or as a whatever, or in their profession, whatever it may be, they don't feel successful. So some people spell success with a $sign, but it has many more dimensions than just the $sign. And the last category would be that of peace, not just your ordinary garden variety of peace, but that peace that is described as passing all understanding. And that kind of lasting core peace permeates all the other categories, of course. And if you look at those 4, basically our wants have been chasing one from one end to the other. And a person loses their health trying to be successful. And so then they spend all the money they've gotten and try to buy back their health, which you can't buy. It's something that's attained. And it's like the dog chasing his tail, gets nowhere on that. But the refreshing thing about concept therapy is it explains that health, happiness, success, and peace, there's a common set of laws, principles of nature that lie behind all of those. And if a person understands those principles, those laws of life, then the attainment of all of these comes automatically, not as separate units, but as a whole package.
Mm-hmm.
In other words, you're a better person having an understanding of the laws of the universe, along with the laws that govern the body, mind, and soul.
That's amazing. So it's true that you learned and taught alongside Dr. Fleet.
Yes.
So what was he like in person? What was it like when the first time you saw him?
Well, first time I saw him was a little kid.
Young. Yeah, he was young. Yeah.
One of the things that I remember most vividly was he had no teeth.
Okay.
Because in World War I, he had been gassed with mustard gas so many times that his teeth had rotted out, and he'd had it one day after the war and went to the doctor, said, pull them all out. They're bothering me. I can't stand it. And pulled them out. He tried dentures. Those didn't work. He said, they bit me. So he gave up on all that, and he learned to speak and to hold his mouth in such a way that you never knew that he had no teeth. But he was trying to impress me as a little kid and went out, I remember, in the sun porch at my grandparents. He was visiting, and he took a walnut that was in the dish there. It must have been fall or something. He took a walnut and he opened up his mouth and with his gums cracked the walnut and then proceeded to pick out the little pieces and chew them up. And that just amazed the heck out of me as a child. I couldn't bite it with my teeth, much less without my teeth.
So you did teach alongside Dr. Fleet as well.
He was my first teacher, along with Dr. Shank, Dr. Higdon, Dr. Harris, on down the list. And then later, after I'd had coursework and so on, yes, I taught with him on the platform and learned a heck of a lot from him, as did my wife.
What's one lesson from Dr. Fleet that you still carry on in your teaching today that you worked alongside him?
He said, always teach to the lowest consciousness that's in the room. Because if they can understand it, then anyone of greater consciousness is going to understand it as well. But if you teach above that level, you may lose a bunch of people below. So that's one lesson I remember about teaching.
Right. And then, like, over the years since you've been teaching for so long, I know as a chiropractor, I attend a lot of seminars, and I'm sure there's plenty of other chiropractors out there that attend a lot of seminars all over the place. So over the decades, what changes have you noticed in how people, including chiropractors, approach personal growth over time?
I think that most start looking for a method, a technique, an application of something that can get them quick results. And then they can move on. And when they figure out that those things work only as long as the individual has a resonance with them, then they start looking for something else when it starts not to work for them. They don't understand the laws of rhythm. They don't understand the laws of attraction. And as a result, they get disillusioned from that and they chase another one. And oh, this is going to be great. And of course, they get all hepped up with a hotshot salesman on the technique, and off they go with it. And it works for a while. And again, it starts to fail them. And it's not until they learn the principles, the laws back of all of that, that they really make changes in themselves. And in doing that, they achieve freedom so that they are free to use whatever technique and get excellent results. They're not enslaved to a particular set of protocols.
That's huge. And would you say that's the most common challenge you get from the docs when they're trying to apply these principles?
Yes. Many of them approach concept therapy as a technique class, which it's not. It has embedded in it a technique.
Right.
It has healing in its wings, as Dr. Fleet used to say. It is much, much more than that. It's a complete understanding of the laws of life, and as I've said, the application of those.
Right. So is it true that you've taught over 1,000 classes?
Probably, yes.
That's
from 1970 to now. How many years is that?
Oh, about 55 years, almost 55 years now. Yeah. Yeah, that's awesome. So as you're talking about technique and stuff like that too, and chiropractors often focus in on the physical adjustment. How can concept therapy's emphasis on like mental and emotional well-being enhance their practice, do you believe?
The mental and emotional well-being of the patient is 80% of it. That's getting the big image, the big idea over to the patient of what it is that you're doing and what is expected as a result of it. And to that extent that they accept that idea, then the physical treatment, whatever it may be, adjustment or whatever, massage, it can be anything, whatever that physical treatment is, will indeed be effective and highly effective. If you fail to get that big idea over to the patient, then you can do anything you want and you will not be effective. But once they get the big idea, yes, then you have tremendous successes, as many doctors have proven.
So what role do you think the mindset plays in a chiropractor's ability to help and heal and connect with their patients?
The mindset of the chiropractor,
Yes.
the mindset plays a tremendous role. They need to have the bigger picture that this is a human soul here, having a mind, having a body. The body's giving him problems. And you need to be able to treat the whole person, the body, the mind, and the soul, and not just focus on one aspect. Obviously, the body's right there in front of you. It's easy to focus on, and that's the thing that they're complaining about. But there's something else at work in there. That was Dr. Fleet's big aha, I guess, that caused this, because he left the college, started his practice with a friend and Woody Alexander, and they were doing okay. But one day, patient came in the morning having some problem. I don't know what, a stomach issue, let's say. And Dr. Fleet examined her very thoroughly and gave the appropriate adjustment for that problem that he had been taught to do. And she left feeling worse than when she came in.
Mm.
And another one came in around noon with the same problem, a stomach issue of some sort. And he examined the fellow very carefully, top to bottom, and diagnosed the thing as the same issue. And he gave the exact same adjustment. And he left and didn't feel better and didn't feel worse. He just felt the way he did when he came in. And then that afternoon, just before closing, another one came in. And this little lady had exactly the same problem, same complaints. He examined her just as carefully and gave her the adjustment he had been taught to give for that, the same as he did the others. And she left feeling like $1 million. She was completely over it, done. And his mind, that was very studious, his mind got to whirring around on this and said, look, I've had the same problem approach me 3 different times. I've found the problem. It's the same problem. And I've given the exact same adjustment, and I'm getting drastically different results. That's not the way I was taught. I should get the same result doing the same thing every time, given the same conditions. And he says, I'm not. And he basically pitched his keys to his partner and said, you run it. I'm going to go home and think for a while.
Hmm.
And so he went home, and then it was after that he had this picture hit him, this peak experience in consciousness, or as metaphysicians would call it, an illumination. And then from that, gradually, he got the words to be able to describe it. The man only had 6 grades of formal education, which back in the late 1800s, early 1900s, that wasn't bad. That was pretty normal. But when you read the totality of his work, it is amazing that he had the ability to put all of that together.
Right. And then what's the most rewarding feedback you've received from people who have taken your classes and learned from the teaching of Dr. Fleet?
Most rewarding feedback would be circling the word change.
Mm-hmm.
It changed my life. It changed the way I relate to my husband, my wife, my whatever. It changed the way I deal with my kids. It changed my level in my profession. Change is the thing. It changed their health. It changed everything.
And why do you think that concept therapy and Dr. Fleet's work really amplifies that type of empowerment in the people?
Would I say that it does?
Or why do you think it does?
I think it has such an impact because of the way he presented it. They're simple ideas, true, But once you have unlearned so much of what you think
Right.
life is, then they begin to make sense. And the way he presents it is starting from the very basics all the way to the most complex things you could possibly imagine. And in that process, it is logical.
Mhm.
And I defy anybody to find a place in there where the logic falls apart. It doesn't. Given those big basic ideas, then if you follow a logical sequence of steps, you arrive at the exact same conclusions Dr. Fleet did.
That's true. Yeah. And would you say that's how concept therapy and Dr. Fleet is different from the other personal development groups out there or systems like, say, NLP or mindfulness or meditation, so forth?
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Yes.
Yep.
Yes, definitely. The others, the systems, the procedures, the techniques, the methods that go down the list, those are all based on concepts of the person that created it. You can do the exact same thing with a different approach, which says it's not the thing that's doing it. It's not the technique, the method, the system, the whatever, but it's something back of it that's really doing the work. And it's that thing back of all of these techniques, methods that Dr. Fleet explained.
Right.
Now,
And then,
how many could grasp it? Good question. Many got the picture, went back and improved immediately. Many heard it, didn't believe it, couldn't be that simple, and went back to their techniques, etc. But at least they've had the opportunity to be exposed to it and to understand.
yeah. And previously, you had mentioned your amazing wife, Emily, and you guys teach together.
Yes.
And then when did you guys first meet?
She enrolled me for the very first Phase 6 course in 1969 in Kansas City, Missouri. And
Okay.
She was Mrs. Dill at that point. Her husband was Dr. Herbert Dill from upstate New York. And he decided that he wanted to be a full-time teacher. And at that point, to do it, you had to move to the Institute here in order to be full-time.
Hmm.
And so they had done that, and she was a fairly new arrival in Texas and was bright and sparkly. And I was awestruck by everything going on anyway, including her. And then when I started to teach in 1970, a year later, then I'd gotten better acquainted with them. And I asked the Dill team, could I teach with you a class or two so that I could learn? And they said, of course.
Mhm.
So one summer, I remember bouncing around in that Cadillac of theirs all over the Southwest, doing lectures and putting ads in newspapers and doing radio shows and TV shows and doing classes and so on in wonderful big metropolises like Muleshoe and Friona, these places that are not much bigger than Valentine. But the students came and the students learned, and it was great experience for me. Fast forward to 1980, 1979 rather. 1979, Dr. Dill dies quickly of an unexpected heart condition. And Emily's left alone. She said, would you do this class we've got coming up with me? It's in Tulsa, Oklahoma. And I said, of course, I'd be glad to. And so I went to Tulsa. We taught the class. And then we taught other classes that the Dill team had on their schedule. And I was teaching the ones I still had on my schedule in California. And 1980, we decided to marry.
Mm-hmm.
And we did, and went on. Have two daughters, one of whom has her doctorate in education and a lot of study in biology, and teaches at a fine private school in Atlanta, outside of Atlanta. And the other one got her degrees in architecture and in business master's in both, and opened her own architectural firm in Lubbock, Texas. And she also teaches at Texas Tech University.
Wow. That's amazing.
And they've all had, both of them have had all the work several times. They wanted, as kids, to do what mommy and daddy did and wanted to accompany us on weekends and so on. When it was age appropriate, then we allowed it.
And then that leads me to my question, which is, how did you and Emily balance teaching with such an intensive schedule with family life, and what can others learn from that about a work-life harmony?
The principle is organization, and Emily's a master at it. She recognizes that things have priorities, and you organize a schedule according to those priorities. And if something else comes along that's a higher priority, then you are adaptable. And in the very first few hours of concept therapy, these principles are taught, and they permeate the rest of the work, of course.
Mm-hmm.
So the ability to organize, whether it be finances or travel schedules or kids. They say you lose all control of your schedule once you have children. That's true to an extent, but the children also fit into that same family composite, is the word we would use, that family relationship.
Mm-hmm.
And that whole thing moves forward in an organized fashion. And the old saying is, if you want something done, give it to a busy person, they'll get it done. Why? They know how to organize.
Mm-hmm.
It may be innate or it may be acquired, but either way, they know how to organize.
Right. So you've taught all of the courses in concept therapy in its curriculum. So what is your favorite topic to explore with people?
Favorite topic? You mean out of the courses?
Or just any idea or concepts?
I enjoy it all. That's a very hard question. Every bit of it I enjoy, but I think you never tire of looking at the aspects of personality and how they work together.
Then, so for people that wanting to get started with concept therapy, where and how should they begin, and where do they get started?
At this point, I think the best way is to contact the Institute, Concept Therapy Institute. There, you can just email information at info@concept-therapy.org
Mm-hmm.
and ask for more information or whatever. They will get back in touch with you either through email, or if you leave a phone number or something, they'll call. But also on that concept-therapy.org site, the web page itself, you'll find links to Dr. Fleet.
Mm-hmm.
Very good movie narrated by his grandson on his background. You'll find links to the Institute, the way it works now, the board and the office staff and so on. You'll also find links to informative material available.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, Raise the Dawn is the one that everyone's that approaches concept therapy is usually heard of or has studied at some point. And that's in the process of being revised. I know Dr. Mike Patton, and he's worked very hard at getting the original pamphlets that Dr. Fleet created from me in order to compare it to the 5 other editions of Rays of Dawn that have come, and to restore a lot of that material that's missing back into it. So the next edition of Rays of Dawn should be a very robust and very complete edition. Anyway, Rays of Dawn is one.
Mm-hmm.
The other book I would suggest is Where There Is a Will, There Is a Way, which is Dr. Fleet's story as told by his son, George. And in a sense, it's a history of the organization itself as Dr. Fleet created it and went through it. It's an excellent book. And the best way to get information is, of course, like Dr. Fleet told my grandfather, take a concept therapy class.
Exactly.
Yeah. You want more information? We're here to teach.
Absolutely. And one of the things I love about CTI, Concept Therapy International Institute, is that they are constantly evolving to meet the needs of this modern world where everything's going digital and fast paced and stuff like that too. I'm looking forward to diving online to increase my studies as well.
They're moving faster than I ever thought possible on this learning management system.
It's exciting.
And loading the courses up there. And it's truly a learning management system, emphasis on learning. They want you to learn. And so you have feedback, you've got group discussion, you've got all sorts of things along the way. And the full class is there on audio and in writing, of audio and video and in writing.
Right.
And I'm most impressed. I've tested the beta version and it's looking very good. And they'll sail with it somewhere down the line here quickly and put several classes up there.
And I know that you've served on the board for many years. And looking ahead, what is your vision for how concept therapy could influence not only the future of chiropractic, but the future of the world?
I see Dr. Fleet's original image of people understanding this, of the basic laws of the body, mind, soul being taught in schools. I see the image more and more clearly as we live it. It seems to be coming into fruition, at least from my perspective. And when people get confused, when the external world isn't satisfying them, they turn within and begin to ask why and how. And concept therapy is there with an answer and has been there for almost 100 years.
Thank you so much, Char, for chatting with me today. And anyone that is watching or listening in, definitely reach out to him. He is a resource to everyone. Good man, good teacher, and always there to help.
You're most welcome. And remember, I owe you a dinner.